Hey folks, welcome to Unqualified, the fantasy football podcast that's been making the mistake of taking their bike to work since 2017. I'm your producer, Rob Diesendorf, here with Sean Brady and Scott Johnson, two fantasy football rivals that have been sabotaging each other for years, but they decided to come together to help you win your league and make your friends look like idiots. Have you guys ever taken your bike to work?
No.
Nope, and I never will.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
Things happen.
It doesn't sound like a good idea. What happened?
I tried to take my Citibike to work today, and I rode this Citibike from Queens to Brooklyn to basically Red Hook.
Oh my God, did you really?
Yep.
You did it from Queens to Brooklyn today?
And it wasn't fun, and it wasn't a good idea. And I got there, and there was no docks available, and I was late, and I was sweaty. And then I finally just threw it in a docking area, and not even a docking area, literally a loading area of some building, not a dock. And I just ran inside, and I was wearing a gray shirt, which was the worst kind of shirt you can wear when you're that sweaty.
Oof.
And it was just
Brutal.
extremely aggressively visible.
Thompson Tea?
Nope. Unfortunately, I wish I was
got to
wearing
invest.
Thompson Tea.
Got to
Sponsor us. Thompson Tea. Thompson Tea sponsor us.
Maybe if you sponsor us, we'll wear your shirts more. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, but little PSA for anyone looking to ride a city bike, don't ride one. If you buy a day pass, whatever, they only let you ride them for 30 minutes at a time, and then every 15 minutes over that 30 minutes, they charge you $2.50. I was not aware of this, and I left the bike off the dock for 4 hours.
Oof.
So you can imagine the bill, but at least they send you a courtesy text after 4 hours that they've been charging you for every 15 minutes in that 4 hours. So
How kind of them.
yeah,
Wow, sponsor us. Citibike.
Citibike, don't sponsor us. Go to hell.
That's a scalding hot take right there.
Yep. But Sean, you rode a bike recently, didn't you? Where did you ride that bike?
Yeah, we did. Katie and I did a similar deal in Charlotte, but we weren't going to work. We were kind of just exploring the city, so it worked out. Same like docking rules, which are kind of BS, but as long as like there are stations available, which Charlotte's a little bit more low key than the Brooklyn Queens area, so that's probably a big part of things. I enjoyed it. It was a good time riding the bikes around Charlotte. So maybe just in a different area. Maybe it's just not meant to happen for you yet. Your city bike love affair.
I'm going to just let this one experience dictate my entire perspective.
Yeah, I think you should hold a grudge against them for the rest of your life.
I will. I actually will.
I love doing that against like brands and companies. It feels great.
Oh, yeah. Good old corporate greed.
Do that with fantasy football players, too.
Oh, yeah. Hauschka.
So, yeah, anyways, today's episode is about quarterbacks and tight ends. I know two guys that got tight ends, and they're on this podcast.
Oh, wow. That was funny. That was a good one.
I'm happy to see you like in better spirits.
Wow.
For all the listeners out there, about like 15 minutes ago, Rob was like at rock bottom, and now he's starting to lift himself out of there, which is good.
I think it's because he ate some food. He's finally eating dinner, and it's late. It's way later than dinner time.
I was definitely hangry. I'm sorry if you hear my food right now, but I'm eating some sushi.
From where?
From this place called Junko Sushi, which isn't really a good name for a sushi place.
That's a terrible name.
Sponsor us.
Yeah. Sponsor us. Junko Sushi.
Junko. That's
the best
disgusting. Really gross name. They're getting some free advertising right now, though. You're welcome.
All right, so we're going to kick off our positional summits with the quarterback position. And the way we're going to do things in these next couple of podcasts are just talk about where the players in this position group are going in fantasy drafts. We're using ESPN's right now, their ADP and projections to kind of meld together where these guys are going in drafts. And we're just going to talk about different tiers of players, which guys we like, where they're going, which guys we don't. And then we'll get to some of our favorite and least favorite guys for this upcoming year after that. So let's start with the top quarterbacks. And this is a unique position because, two of the best players in the NFL, Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, are not going to get picked in fantasy drafts until about round 5 and 6. You might see him go a little bit earlier, but that's where the going rate is for Rodgers and Brady. Scott, do you like either of these guys in this range, or are you waiting entirely?
Yeah, I'm still waiting. So they're pretty much going rounds. Yeah, you're like you said, 5 and 6. So the hope is like you stack up 3 or 4 studs before you take these guys, but I still don't like them this early. So if you look at and I'm not denying their talent levels. Rodgers and Brady both had big offseason losses. So Brady lost Brandon Cooks, who was a pretty good deep threat, not the number one guy, like necessarily the number one guy or a world beater for him last year, but he had like 1,100 yards and some deep threat capability, big play capability. And then if you look at Rodgers, and sorry, to go back to Brady, they just drafted Sony Michel. So they might get back to ground and pound a little bit more. And then Rodgers lost Jordy Nelson, his favorite target. So, and he's coming off a pretty big injury last year. So both these guys, the offseason has been a little somewhat tumultuous, not too crazy, but enough for me to not take them round 5 and 6, maybe round 7, after I get 3 wide receivers and 3 running backs.
Yeah, so like as we go through the other positions, you'll see the caliber of player that you can get in rounds 5 and 6 at the running back and wide receiver position. And for me, that's why I tend to pass on these two here. I think I would take Rodgers in this range, but Brady, no shot. I'm not interested in him in the what's really the heart of the draft for when you're going to win your league. So I'm passing on Brady there. Maybe Rodgers, but I typically don't get him because I want to wait like a little bit longer and somebody snaps him up. But let's talk about a lot of quarterbacks in this next tier that people are excited about. So that we're talking about rounds 7 through 10 here. This is kind of like after everyone fills out their starting running back and wide receiver cores and maybe possibly pick their tight end before this point. So this is kind of where people start thinking, all right, here's when I want to grab a QB. So the guys there that are going in this range are Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, Cam Newton, Carson Wentz, and Andrew Luck, who's kind of going on the back end of like round 10 area. So out of these 5 quarterbacks, who jumps off the page to you, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still... So these guys, for one reason or another, are all... they could be the number 1, 2, or 3 guys like in the position at the end of the year, but for one reason or the other, they have some knocks against them. So one by one, you look at Deshaun Watson, coming off a big ACL injury last year. Russell Wilson just lost Jimmy Graham, one of the best red zone receiving threats in the league. And they drafted a running back in the first round, so they're going to probably get back to ground and pound a little bit more. Cam Newton, pretty. I mean, they drafted DJ Moore, but chemistry hasn't been there. He hasn't lost too much, but had a pretty off year last year comparatively. Carson Wentz, big injury to his ACL as well, and then Andrew Luck missed all of last year for a shoulder injury. So all of these guys, you need to know the risk going in, and it's up to you if you want to research and take up on that risk. But the only guy I would really want here, I wouldn't want Wentz because of that knee. He's probably not going to start week 1. Luck, his throwing shoulder scares me, even though they got Eric Ebron, another tight end, and hopefully he'll be back to his form in 2015. I would take Watson and Cam. Those are the only 2 guys because Watson has had enough time to recover from his ACL injury, and he should take another leap in his second year. So those are the only 2 guys I would consider taking, and probably around 8 or 9.
Wow, I'm actually in complete agreement with you. I was hoping we could disagree a little bit, but the only way I'll disagree is I'll say I would take Watson or Cam in round 7 because Cam, as bad as his passing was last year, he's just so solid on the ground. He puts the ball in the end zone with his legs, and that gives him just a really, really nice floor. And he, I think, finished the year as the number 2 quarterback last year, which is crazy to me. I owned him, and it didn't seem like he was playing that well. Definitely had some off games, but as inconsistent as he can be, he gives you a nice floor with his rushing upside. That's another reason you could take Wilson, who's probably going to have to be a one-man show this year. I'm not as excited about the Seahawks compared to the Panthers. So Wilson, I'm a little bit lower on. I'd probably still take him in this range. And Watson, we all know how both of us feel about Watson, so we won't beat a dead horse here. But this guy is a star in the making. Wentz and Luck, I agree. I think I'm more willing to gamble on Luck just because he's had so much time off to recover. Wentz scares me a little bit, especially if they rush him back. So those two I'm a little bit lower on it, especially when we look at this next tier and we see the kind of value you can get later in the draft. I'm not going nuts if I don't get anybody in this group, but I'll definitely be excited about Watson and Cam.
So one thing about Cam, too, he had the most rushing attempts last year that he has in his whole career. His rushing touchdowns are pretty much in the 5 to 7, 8 range, except for that one really good year in 2015 where I think he was the number 1 overall quarterback, number 1 overall player, and he had an insane amount of touchdowns, 35 through the air. He's typically like a 20 touchdown through the air kind of guy, and 10 interceptions and 3,300 yards passing, and 100 carries, 500 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So if anything, he's consistent. He's actually been really consistent throughout his whole career. So I would feel really good about him. Actually, as I'm talking about it, it's like light bulbs going off. I'm like, I might want Cam. Actually, yeah, he's really growing on me. And Watson, yeah, I agree. Luck, I do agree with you. The whole offseason, I just think they're going to baby him and they're going to run it a lot more with those 2 rookie running backs and Marlon Mack as well.
Yeah, you definitely saw Luck do kind of checking down everything in their first couple of preseason games. So that does scare me a little bit. But again, when we look at this next range, there's a lot of guys that are very polarizing here, but there's a lot to be excited about. So we're talking about rounds 11 through 14 here, which is really the back part of the draft. This is you took, maybe 9 or 10 position players before you even think about taking a quarterback. And the caliber of player you can get here is very enticing. So Big Ben and Kirk Cousins in the front end of this group at round 11. And then the rest of these guys go a little bit later. So Matt Stafford, Jimmy G, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Pat Mahomes, Phillip Rivers, and Alex Smith, who's kind of going in that 13-14 range. Scott, who jumps off the page here in this later part of the draft?
Yeah, this is the sweet spot. This is where every single mock draft I'm taking a quarterback. My one real league, I took a quarterback here. These guys are the ones that could hit it big, and for some reason they're going a little later than those round 7 to 10 guys. And I get it, those round 7 to 10 guys could be the number 1 quarterback, but these guys are you're going to get 10. You're going to tell me you're going to get 10 positional players running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, and stack up on them, and then you could still get maybe a top 5 potential quarterback. That's crazy value. Big Ben and Kirk, I'm not taking this year, just for various reasons. I think Kirk isn't going to do as well as everyone thinks in Minnesota. I know he's been really good the past couple of years with the Redskins, a top 5, 6 quarterback, but and he has better positional players. But I think they're going to run it a lot more with Dalvin Cook and Latavius Murray, and that defense is so good, and they're going to shut down opposing offenses that Kirk's not going to have to throw it as much as he did with the Redskins. He played a ton of catch-up with the Redskins. And that's why he had so many yards and touchdowns. So I'm not taking him. Big Ben, we talked about in previous pods. Jimmy G, I think he's getting overvalued a little bit. Matt Ryan, doesn't inspire me. The guys that really inspire me are Phillip Rivers, Matthew Stafford, and Drew Brees. If you told me 2 years ago that Drew Brees would be going in round 12, I would say you're insane after he went 30th that year. It's crazy to me that he fell so far because he had 23 touchdowns last year, which is his lowest since 05, so I get it. Snatch up Drew Brees here. That's crazy. They're missing Mark Ingram for the first 4 games. They're only going to rely on Kamara, who hasn't been a bell cow back at all. Take a flyer on Brees. They got Cameron Meredith as the wide receiver opposite Michael Thomas, who is the most receptions in his first 2 years in NFL history. Take Brees, take Stafford. He's always a steady Eddie. Take Rivers, who hasn't had less than 4,500 yards in 7 years or something like that. Crazy. Those guys are going to do fine. They're going to be top 10.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I think these guys obviously they're going to probably wind up, the guys that do exceed the expectation here are going to wind up in the 5-6 range. They're not going to be the number 1 overall quarterback. But if you look at what you can get in round 11 and 14 as far as positional players, this is where you want to take a quarterback. So for example, if you reach and you take Russell Wilson, say in round 7, you're going to be in the rounds 11 through 14, say you want to pick a wide receiver there. You're going to be looking at guys like Jordy Nelson, Rashard Matthews, Paul Richardson, none of those guys are like they're not going to win you your league. But if you flip that and you take a round 7 wide receiver like Corey Davis, and then you wind up taking Matt Stafford later, I think you'd much rather have that outcome for your team, just because that's a guy that could win you your league if he explodes this year. And Matt Stafford's not going to be that much worse than Russell Wilson. Obviously, he'll be much more frustrating to watch every week, but as far as the numbers go, he's going to be at least 80% of what Russell Wilson gives you, so that's going to really come out to help you out. If you do, the longer you wait, the more you maximize value. So that's just kind of what we're getting at here in this section. As far as the guys mentioned here, I don't know. I love Kirk Cousins. I feel like Dalvin Cook is such a good receiver out of the backfield, and he's got two of the most, probably, in my opinion, the best wide receiver tandem in the league. I don't know. I love Kirk this year. I think he's definitely not going to do worse than last year. So I think that's a guy that I'm kind of targeting in this range. And I agree with you on Breeze. There's no way he doesn't regress back to the mean, which is a good thing for him. I think they're going to pass the ball a little bit more this year, and without Ingram, they might throw the ball to Kamara early. I don't know. I like Breeze a lot this year with in that range. So this brings us down to the last part of our QB summit as far as the draft positions go. Guys that are currently being undrafted, and this is kind of like the deep sleeper range for other positions, but we know all these quarterbacks. So the guys in this undrafted range are Marcus Mariota, Jared Goff, Ryan Tannehill, Blake Bortles, Dak Prescott, and Mitch Trubisky. Who do you like in this group, Scott?
Yeah, so I know you're big on Mariota this year, upcoming, and I am too. I don't know if I'm as big on him as you. I don't know if he'll be a QB1 or a starter. He'll be a fringe, like, bye-week fill-in guy, I think, because he has running ability too. He just hasn't been proven he could be healthy, so you can't really rely on him like for 16 games. I actually like Ryan Tannehill coming back from an injury last year. He doesn't have great positional players. This is just like a gut feeling. He doesn't have great positional guys. The run game might be relied on a little bit more, but Kenyon Drake can catch it out of the backfield and his big playability. You were at the Panthers-Dolphins game. You said Albert Wilson had pretty good chemistry with Tannehill, but
yeah,
if you look like 2 or 3 years ago, Tannehill was like a fringe QB1. I think he was QB10 in like 2015 or 16 or something like that. And he was getting drafted like kind of high the next year. Had an off year, and then he got injured last year. So there's been some like things that have derailed him, but I like him as if you're not drafting him, or if you're taking him in like round 17 or something like that, or 16. If you just took like a Matt Ryan and you're not feeling great about him, like you could take a Tannehill out of these guys. I think the problem with Jared Goff, and he did really well last year and took a really good next step in the second year. He had so many good positional players around him that and play calling, and Todd Gurley which went off running wise, that he didn't have to do like too much. Like not too much was asked of him. And yeah, Brandon Cooks will help, but I just feel like he's almost already reached his ceiling, which is like QB 15 or 14 or something like that. I don't know what he was last year. But yeah, I'd probably take Tannehill out of these guys, and then Mariota, and then Dak. Yeah,
I agree. I really like Mariota for the reasons you mentioned earlier. I'll get to him a little bit later when we go into some of our favorite guys from this position. But I agree on Goff. I don't see him going much better than he was last year. They really protected him last year, which people don't realize. He played out of his mind, don't get me wrong. But that team was a running team, and they threw the ball in the flat a ton to Gurley. I think Goff is going to be good, but he's not going to be a guy that's going to really like move the needle for you. I do think that Dak Prescott could be. I know we were very harsh on him last year, but I think there's a little bit of a Ewing theory effect with Dez leaving that Dallas receiving core. Dude, Dak was QB9 last year, and he was even better than that his rookie year. So like it doesn't pop off the screen, but he puts up numbers. He's kind of like Cam Light. He had 6 rushing touchdowns his rookie year and 6 last year, and that gives him a lot of upside. I think this guy is definitely, I get it. He doesn't have great receiving guys to throw to, but as long as Zeke plays, this guy is like a QB1. So I think he's a guy I'm targeting if I wait forever on a quarterback and I don't love my starter. Like, say, maybe I wind up with like Matt Ryan, like you said, or even if I'm worried about Phillip Rivers' age, I'll take maybe Dak as a backup. And another guy in that same vein is Blake Bortles, who is on paper, or not on paper, on the screen, one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, but he puts up numbers. He's a QB2.
Really is.
He's a QB2, and he has been his whole career. It's not pretty. You don't have any confidence in it, but it somehow works out. I'm not as high on Trubisky as you are. And Tannehill, again, he's kind of just like, the replacement level starting quarterback. Like, he's not a top 10 quarterback. He's not a bottom 10 quarterback. He's just, he's just a guy. And sometimes that's enough when you're really weak at that position. So if you learn anything from the amount of guys we just talked about, don't go crazy and take Aaron Rodgers in round 3, because that's going to kill your draft, as opposed to sitting and waiting and maybe getting a guy like Phillip Rivers, who, is not going to get the oohs and ahs from your draft table, but, he allows you to do better at other spots.
All right, now that we did our QB tiers, it's time to get into a little segment we like to call Stock Market. We had a few names for this, and we came up with Stock Market. That was what we ended on. Stock Market, very original. Anyway,
I told them to name it Screw Citibike, but they didn't want to do it.
Yeah, you said it's something a little ruder than that. But
oh, really?
They should still sponsor
What'd
us.
I say, Scott?
I'm not going to say it.
Oh, what'd I say?
This is a PG pod.
Why don't you want to say it?
I don't know why you're berating me right now, but anyway. Let's get into the stock market.
Because I had a bad day, that's why.
It's called deflecting.
I got to take it out on somebody.
Thanks. Just read Alexander's No Good, Horrible, Very Bad Day. That book. That actually helps when you have a bad day, reading that book.
You know what would help if Citibike went bankrupt?
Or that, yeah, I could do that. All right, so stock market. So basically here we're going to talk about like biggest risers and fallers in the offseason, home run guys, biggest bust potential, bandwagon QBs, things of that nature. So you can get a better sense of like which guys to be on your radar, which guys you shouldn't be on your radar, things like that. So first section, I guess, of the stock market we have is biggest offseason rise and fall. So, Sean, what do you have for the biggest offseason rise in value and then the biggest offseason fall in value compared to last year?
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest one, I think, starting from it depends on where you start, your clock from, but Jimmy G, I think, has risen the most in fantasy terms among QBs, just because, those 5 games or whatever it was, 5 or 6 games were just magical last year. He looks like he's ready to jump off, and explode this year in the Kyle Shanahan's offense in San Francisco. He didn't put up a ton of touchdowns last year, so the people that do like him, I'm lukewarm on him. I really like him as a player. I like what he does for that offense, but as far as him, fantasy-wise, I'm not completely going nuts over him. I do like him. I would take him as my QB2, but the people that are in love with this are really hoping that he regresses to the mean and scores more touchdowns this year. But all that being said, Jimmy G last year was a backup quarterback, and now he's getting looked at as a possible fantasy starter. So that's definitely the biggest rise for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Patrick Mahomes is another like contender in that, but yeah, Jimmy G. The only problem is like they haven't added too many weapons for him. So hopefully the run game will be better with Jerick McKinnon in Kyle Shanahan's offense, and Jimmy G seems like a good fit for there. But yeah, biggest rise compared to like draft season last year is Jimmy G when he was a backup for the New England Patriots. And then biggest fall, what are you thinking? You're thinking Matt Ryan here, huh?
Yeah, Matt Ryan, I mean, we kind of saw this coming last year, so shout out to us. He had a historic year, not so coincidentally, under Kyle Shanahan, and really took a step back last year under Steve Sarkisian's offense. So I kind of think he is what he is at this point. I think that 1 year was magical. He's a consistent QB2 that you're never going to get excited about. If he didn't have Julio Jones, he's not a guy that you probably even have relevance, but he's a good quarterback. Not going to lose you any weeks, but he's not going to win you much weeks. Many weeks winning.
Much more weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matt Ryan, and then I think another contender for that biggest faller is Dak. I mean, he lost Des Bryant, he lost Jason Witten in the offseason. Hopefully Zeke is, completely out of the woods in terms of his off-season crap, but because that'll help Dak. But Dak is another guy that definitely is fallen, and like we just said in the previous section, he's kind of getting undrafted, but compared to last year where he was getting drafted pretty early. So yeah, we got next section we got is most overvalued and most undervalued. So kind of similar. I mean, the biggest offseason rise and fall is like throughout a whole year and the offseason whose stock rose and whose stock fell. This is just who's getting overvalued and who's getting undervalued. So, You want to go first with your overvalued and undervalued?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we did a similar thing last year, and I picked the same guy, and he obviously proved me wrong. But Tom Brady, I think, is getting overvalued this year. He lost Brandon Cooks. Julian Edelman suspended the first 4 games. Gronk is always shaky injury-wise, and they just drafted a running back. And, obviously they made it all the way to the Super Bowl, but I think he's going to start to show that he's taken some steps back. I think he doesn't have to put up huge numbers for them to win games. As big Jets fans as we are, like, the AFC East is just a cakewalk, so they're not going to have to, like, blow people out. They can kind of cruise through the division, get to the playoffs, and I don't see Brady having a huge statistical year. I think he's a guy that's definitely getting overvalued, especially in, the 5-6 range. I'd much rather wait and take a different quarterback.
Yeah, and like, he's 41 years old. He just turned 41. I know no one wants to talk about it, but eventually he's going to retire. And he wants to play until he's 45. We get it.
I can't wait.
41.
Can't wait till he retires.
Yeah. Geez, so Sam Darnold could take that division over finally. But like, it might happen this year. It might happen next year. We have no idea. Losing Brandon Cooks hurts. Edelman is out for the first couple of games. That hurts. Their wide receivers are like Chris Hogan, who's back, and Cordarrelle Patterson, and like guys like that, Philip Dorsett. And no one really instilling confidence. And at 41, like, who knows? My biggest overvalued is Big Ben, and we touched upon this in a previous pod, or at least I did with my hatred of my fantasy hatred of Big Ben. But road games, he's terrible. Little synopsis: road games, he's terrible. Home games, he's good. Lost Martavis Bryant, big field stretcher. Le'Veon Bell is in a contract year probably, and just got franchised again, so he's probably going to be out next year. Big Ben's like 37. He's getting a little frail. They drafted Mason Rudolph in the second round as his predecessor, or successor rather. So I think he's getting overvalued in round like 11 or 12. I'm not even taking him this year.
Yeah.
And what do you got for undervalued?
I was just going to say, for undervalued, this is where you want to, like, make things happen. You don't even need to draft a second quarterback this year. You could just pick up Dak Prescott off waivers in most leagues. This guy was QB9 last year. I'm pretty sure he finished top 7 as a rookie, and he rushes for touchdowns. Like, what else do you want from a quarterback? Yeah, he's going to turn the ball over a ton. Yeah, he lost Des Bryant, who I think actually held him back a little bit. I don't know. I think Dak could have a nice little renaissance here, especially if Zeke is healthy. I think Dak is a sneaky good QB2. He could wind up in the QB1 discussion by the end of the year.
What else do people want from him? What do you want?
You're getting a running back as a quarterback. Like, it's just the best part of fantasy.
You're getting like a backup running back at least, yeah, and someone that could throw it. Yeah. So my undervalued is Philip Rivers. This guy has consistently put up numbers for like the past 10 years. And he's so boring to like own, if you want to think about it that way, because his throwing motion's weird, and he's kind of a weird, quirky guy, and
he doesn't have ACLs in his knees.
Yeah. And his pass catchers, besides like Keenan Allen, are kind of pedestrian. Like, maybe Mike Williams will have a good year, but Mike Williams, the 7th overall pick last year in the NFL draft, was hurt a lot of last year. Should be coming back this year. So he has him. He has Keenan Allen in the slot. Melvin Gordon is still one of the best running backs. Yeah. Tyrell Williams is another outside threat. Travis Benjamin is another guy that could stretch the field. He lost Hunter Henry, but he has Virgil Green as his tight end. So he has a lot of pieces around him, and I think he can put up another very solid season of like maybe QB 10. So, and I think he's getting underdrafted completely. I would be fine with having him as my backup if you drafted one of those guys in like the 11 to 14 round like range, like, Stafford or Breeze or something like that. So he's getting way too undervalued. Next one we got is a home run breakout. So this is guys that are kind of going maybe undrafted or very, very late that we think can be home runs this year and knock it out of the park. What do you got?
Yeah, so this is the same guy as my bandwagon QB, the guy I'm going to be captain of the Marcus Mariota Express this year. This guy had a really rough year last year, so let me just acknowledge that first. However, he was still statistically the number 1 play-action passer in the NFL, ahead of guys like Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Carson Wentz, all these incredible quarterbacks. Marcus Mariota was the number 1 play-action passer as far as passer rating. So
nice.
Obviously, the problem was that Mike Mularkey and whatever offensive coordinator they had there didn't call play action nearly enough. They were just a terribly coached offense. Now they bring in Matt LaFleur, who was the offensive coordinator of the LA Rams under Sean McVay, who called the most play action passes in the NFL last year. Do you put two and two together here? Marcus Mariota, he may not be, the number one overall quarterback, but for where you can get him, which is for literally nothing, you might as well take this guy as your second quarterback, because he not only is going to excel in a new system, not only has possibly some elite weapons in Corey Davis, Delaney Walker, two really good running backs, one of the best pass-catching running backs in the league, and Deion Lewis. I just really like this Titans offense to bounce back this year. Plus he gives you a little bit of running upside as well. So Marcus Mariota is definitely someone I'm keeping my eye on. I think I'm probably going to own him a lot this year on my 3 teams. I probably would have him on all 3. So he's my breakout guy. He's also my bandwagon guy. Let's go Titans.
Rob, take some notes so you can draft Mariota instead of Sean in all of our leagues. Just saying.
Just to piss me off.
Yeah, just to piss him off. My home run. So I took this as like a guy that no one is really drafting, and like our segment last year, home run or whatever we did last year. I forget what it was called. Mitchell Trubisky. Anyway, on the Bears is my home run hit. So no one's really drafting him. I think in a two QB league, he could be a solid second or third quarterback for you. But they just added Allen Robinson in as one of the best deep threats. He's kind of one-dimensional, but again, really good deep threat. Catches a lot of touchdowns for Jacksonville when he was on there. So they just added him. Tariq Cohen is in his second season now. They have a really good, solid starting running back in Jordan Howard. And I think he can take a second-year leap, kind of like Jared Goff did. He had a very similar rookie year to Jared Goff, like 6-7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 8 interceptions. And then Jared Goff in the right system, which Trubisky now has. I think his offensive coordinator is Matt Nagy, whatever. I don't know.
He's the head coach now. That's crazy.
Oh, sorry. There you go. We really do our research here. I think he could have a really good second-year leap. Not saying he's going to get 29 touchdowns, but maybe like 20 and be serviceable. Biggest bust potential, what do you got this year?
For me, it's got to be Carson Wentz. Just the injury is really scaring me off. I don't think he should rush back. I don't think he should play until like week 5. There's no point. They're going to be so good. Their third-string quarterback just like went off on someone in the preseason. Sudfeld, I don't even know his first name, but he's putting up like 200 yards and 2 touchdowns on good teams. Sudfeld. So there's no point for them to rush him back. I think the Redskins are going to be what they are, not great. The Giants are probably going to be a little bit better, but still not really a huge threat. And then the Cowboys, we just kind of talked about, they don't have a ton of upside offensively. Maybe Dak and Zeke, get the band back together from 2 years ago, but the Eagles probably will run away with that division. So there's no point to rush Wentz back, and I think for that reason, they'll probably take it easy with him. That's not good for his fantasy value. I don't like Wentz this year. As much as we loved him last year, I'm staying away.
Yeah, fair enough on that. I think Foles is like a pretty solid backup quarterback, and he should be good for week 1. His shoulder seems to be fine now. My biggest bust potential is Andrew Luck. Obviously he didn't play last year, but that's pretty much the reason why he's biggest bust potential it was his throwing shoulder. Yeah. And that takes a lot of confidence out of you. I know he tried to come back last year to throw in some practices. Not a day or two later, they pulled him and said he needs to rehab again for another 6 weeks. So something happened in that practice. That just takes a lot out of your confidence and your ability to throw deep. I just don't see him having a good statistical year. I don't think they're going to run it. I just don't think the Colts are going to be very good. That's kind of where I'm at with them. And then we alluded to it a little bit, but bandwagon QB. So guys that some people are talking about that you're just jumping on the bandwagon for this year for quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'm not even going to repeat what I said for Mariota. He's dirt cheap. He's got a huge upside in multiple ways. He's somebody that I think will really, really surprise some people this year. Yeah,
and I got Pat Mahomes on the Chiefs. So Alex Smith just got traded to the Redskins, who actually might not do bad with the Redskins this year. But Pat Mahomes, bandwagon QB, everyone's kind of slowly, he's getting some hype talking about him. This guy can run. at Texas Tech. He was a proven runner. He has a rocket arm. If you saw the preseason game between the Chiefs and the Falcons, look for the touchdown pass from Mahomes to Tyreek Hill. It flew 70 yards in the air. 65, 70 yards in the air. And like Tyreek Hill is one of the fastest, if not the fastest wide receiver in the game. So you put those two together and you have a pretty lethal combination. Travis Kelce is one of the most athletic tight ends and pretty fast as well. They got Spencer Ware back as a goal line back to take some pressure off of Kareem Hunt. So the run game should be better. So Pat Mahomes is my guy that could be like this year's Carson Wentz in quarterback. And I think that does it for our QBs. Any questions? DM us. Find us in the channels. Ask about some quarterbacks.
Stay active in those channels.
Yeah, stay active in the channels, and we're going to get into tight ends next.
All right, so with the quarterbacks out of the way, let's get to our tight end summit. We're climbing up the tight end summit here. We're going to start with the top three, the big three. And these three guys are going to rounds 3 and 4. Sometimes they end around 2. But they're Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz. Scott, I know you're a big Zach Ertz guy, but are you taking any of these three guys in rounds 3 and 4?
Yeah, so I'm a huge Zach Ertz guy. Love the guy. I picked him last year in a bunch of my leagues because I thought he was going to hit it big, and he did. He was one of the top 3 tight ends and made it to the big 3. I'm going to say what I say every single year about Gronk. It's too early for him. I get the talent's there, but he's like 29, 30. He's always hurt. He's like always hurt. He's one of the most talented guys, but I can't say it enough. Like, you need to draft another tight end if you're taking him. And I'm not spending 2 picks. First of all, I'm not spending my 3rd round pick and a 11th round pick or 12th round pick on tight ends. Like, it's just not going to happen. The position is not that important where it was like 4 or 5 years ago. It's definitely changed. Last year was an off year for tight ends. I think Travis Kelce might have the biggest fall this year because Patrick Mahomes, we don't really know too much about him. Alex Smith was throwing it a ton to him because he was kind of a check down king, but we have no idea. Like, with Sammy Watkins in the fold now, who's a deep threat, Tyreek Hill is a deep threat, Patrick Mahomes, who has a huge deep arm and is a big runner. We have no idea how well he's going to do. Travis Kelce might be the biggest faller this offseason. And Zach Ertz, they drafted a guy, I think it was Goddard, right?
I think it's Goddard.
Okay, Goddard.
One of those two.
I got to work on my pronunciations of these players. In the 2nd round, and again, Carson Wentz might not be available for week 1. It might be Nick Foles, but now there's some competition. So they had like Mike Wallace in the offseason. So like both of these guys, Kelce and Ertz, have some things that happen this offseason, and Gronk still has the always injury history. So I'm not taking any of these guys. No, too early.
I think in round 3, I would probably take Gronk, and if I'm at the back of round 3, I'll take Kelce. Gronk, if he's your 3rd best player, obviously you do have to take the insurance policy, but I personally will do that. I'll take Gronk in round 3. I'll take a guy like, not Tyler Eifert. Sorry about that. I almost double jinxed myself. I'll take a guy like Kyle Rudolph later, and then be set, and then possibly have a weekly upside at the weakest position in fantasy football. So I like Gronk around 3, Kelce maybe in the end of round 3, and Ertz scares me a tiny bit just because we don't know if Wentz will be in there. We don't know what the rookie's going to look like. So I'll kind of shy away from Ertz. I doubt all 3 end up in the top 3 at tight ends this year. So that's another big reason I'm kind of iffy. But if it breaks right, if there's nobody I love in round 4 or the end of round 3, I'll definitely consider these guys. All right, so then in rounds 5 and 6, we don't really see any tight ends going in this range, so we're going to skip right on to rounds 7 through 10. This is a little bit later in the draft, but still definitely firmly in the middle, and these are definitely some guys that are household names and maybe a little bit older for a couple of them. So we're talking about Greg Olsen, Delaney Walker, Evan Ingram, a new addition to this group, and then Jimmy Graham. So do any of these guys find their way onto your team this year, Scott? What do you think?
So I'm not taking Jimmy Graham. His offseason arrival to Green Bay doesn't bode well for his fantasy purposes. So the last time the Packers with Aaron Rodgers had a top 5 tight end was Jermichael Finley in 2011. So then they got Jared Cook, they got Martellus Bennett in previous years, and everyone was like, oh, cool, like they're going to be a great tight end, and it didn't happen. Jimmy Graham is he might get he might push for double-digit touchdowns, and that's pretty good for a tight end, maybe a tight end 1, but at the same time, the chances of him doing that are slimmer and slimmer the older he gets. He's 31 now. They have Devontae Adams, who has the second most red zone targets in the last 3 years. Jimmy Graham has the first. So maybe like too many mouths to feed in the red zone kind of thing. So Graham, I just don't think he's going to be a tight end 1. I do like Delaney Walker, as I always do. He's getting old too, but and Evan Engram. I think Evan Engram will do really well with Odell Beckham back in the fold. That'll take some pressure off of him, and I think Evan Engram, and like Sterling Shepard, the wide receiver on the Giants, are going to eat the middle of the field up.
See, I disagree on Engram. I'm not taking Engram this year just because, he excelled last year with Beckham and Shepard and every other wide receiver on the Giants injured. And they just added Saquon Barkley. They got Odell back, and Shepard's healthy. And, you're talking about the fourth receiving option from Eli Manning. That doesn't get me excited at all. So Engram is a guy that I definitely don't like as much as I did last year. But I agree. I love Delaney Walker. Delaney Walker is just quietly just a bankable tight end. He gets you yardage and touchdowns. So he's got a nice floor, decent ceiling. He was a member of my Hall of Fame first ever championship team last year, so he's got a special place in my heart. Delaney Walker, I'm definitely big on him this year. And Greg Olsen, maybe it's the last year of his career, but I still think he's Cam Newton's top target when he's healthy. So I like Greg Olsen in a bounce back year as well. Now we'll move on to a little bit of a deeper territory here. Rounds 11 to 14. This is the back end of your draft. So the guys going in this range are Jordan Reed, Kyle Rudolph, Jack Doyle, Trey Burton, new arrival in Chicago, and David Njoku, who's really definitely rising the last couple of weeks as he puts on a nice preseason performance. He looks great in Hard Knocks. So he's a guy that's kind of risen into that territory as well. Scott, who do you like in rounds 11 to 14?
I love two of these guys. Jordan Reed, no, because he's always hurt. Njoku can't catch worth a shit. Trey Burton is too unproven. And we don't know how well Trubisky's going to do with in terms of tight ends. Jack Doyle and Kyle Rudolph, I think, are going to be two of the top 5 tight ends this year.
Wow.
Yeah, Kyle Rudolph. So Kirk Cousins coming to Minnesota is the single best thing that could happen to Kyle Rudolph. He did really well last year, 8 touchdowns, I think 600 yards with Case Keenum throwing it to him, but that was Case Keenum. You have to figure Kirk's going to be an uptick for him. And Kirk always throws to tight ends. If you look at like Jordan Reed in previous years, he's relied a lot on them. And Rudolph is, I think, going to be like top 3 this year, honestly. He could be like this year's Zach Ertz. Jack Doyle, he's always seems to be on the sleeper list like in the past couple of years. And I think this is the year where he did well last year, but not like top 5 well. I think this is the year he vaults into the top 5. Andrew Luck is back. I think with off-season shoulder issues and all of last year, he's going to rely a lot on his safety valve, Jack Doyle. And yeah, they got Eric Ebron, but Andrew Luck has spread it around to, if you look at like previous years, they used to have Colby Fleener and Dwayne Allen together. So I don't think it really means anything for Doyle. I think if anything, it might help him actually.
Yeah, I actually love every single tight end in this range. This is probably where I'm going to take my tight end this year.
Me too.
I'm definitely lowest on Njoku. Obviously he's the most unproven here, and that's saying a lot because Trey Burton kind of came out of nowhere last year. But Jordan Reed, this is the price that I would consider him. I wouldn't consider him in round 7 to 10 or 5 to 6. And honestly, he used to go in rounds 3 and 4. If I have to spend an 11th, 12th round pick on Jordan Reed, this guy was tight end 1 a couple of years ago. And, obviously the injury risk, I get it. You need to take 2 tight ends. So similar to the Gronk thing. However, could win your league if he stays healthy. I love Kyle Rudolph. I don't get why he's here. He's definitely, I would rather have him than Jimmy Graham straight up. So I don't know why he's getting drafted so much later. Jack Doyle, I definitely like. I think Ebron is going to scare some people off, but that's a good thing for guys that are bullish on Jack Doyle. And Trey Burton is very interesting to me. I think when you look at a young quarterback that, they're kind of easing into a bigger part of the offense, Trey Burton could be a huge part of that Chicago offense this year. I like him. He looks good in the preseason. And if I wait forever and I get screwed out of Kyle Rudolph and Jack Doyle, I'll take Trey Burton as my starting tight end. I'll definitely grab a backup at that point. But, it's a thin position, and I think just the volume he's going to see, I think he's a definitely interesting candidate for a top 10 tight end this year, especially in the round 12, 13 range where he's going. All right, so now let's get into the thick of the undrafted deep sleeper tight ends.
Thick of it.
This is kind of rough territory, honestly, but I'll just list off a bunch of names and we'll see who we like, who we don't like. Charles Clay, Tyler Eifert, George Kittle, Cameron Brate, and O.J. Howard in Tampa Bay. I would love either one of those guys if they weren't on the same team, but alas. Vance McDonald, who's now on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Gesicki, who was just drafted to the Miami Dolphins. Ricky Seals-Jones, who had a moment or two last year for the Cardinals. And then Ed Dickson, who you added on here from Seattle. What do you think about this group of guys? Who do you like here?
Yeah, so not many, but I don't know. I think George Kittle could be like a home run hit. So he was supposed to get drafted in the 3rd or 4th round in the NFL draft. He lasted until the 5th. He's on the 49ers now, and Jimmy G could find a safety valve in George Kittle. He had a couple games here and there as a rookie last year, so could be good. I think O.J. Howard might have a second-year leap, and I think you saw that in certain games last year. You know, he overtook Cameron Brate. Cameron Brate had a couple good games in the beginning of the year, and then he kind of overtook him as the better tight end. And I think one offseason, some reps with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who will start the season, and then Jameis Winston, who will take over eventually, would do him really good. And he's too talented and too athletic to not do well. Ed Dickson could be a really, really late sleeper, maybe some guy to keep on your waiver wire, like Radar in Seattle. And then Gesicki in Miami, I think could do really well with Tannehill coming back.
Yeah, I can kind of see it for each of those guys. I'm definitely not sold on any of them, honestly. I will mention one guy who, yeah, you can laugh at me and scoff at me all you want, but if you take Trey Burton and you want another high-profile backup that has a ton of upside, Tyler Eifert. I mean, Cincinnati can't be this bad again, can they? I mean, they probably will be,
Dude,
but Tyler Eifert is one of the... He definitely is made of glass, but if you take Trey Burton and you're not thrilled with like the ceiling, roll the dice on Tyler Eifert. You know, you could do a lot worse with your, last pick in the draft or first guy off the waiver wire. I mean, if he's healthy and you get 5 healthy weeks from him and he's healthy, obviously that's the caveat. He's an elite tight end when he's on the field. It's just he's so inconsistent injury-wise. But in this range, you're really just hoping, you're looking at what guys can do as opposed to what they can't do. So for me, Tyler Eifert's definitely someone that's interesting. Hopefully his injury woes are behind him. I don't know. Probably not.
Probably not. Probably won't ever be. But who knows?
But compared to a guy like, Ricky Seals-Jones, who, looked pretty good last year, but, he's a tight end, and the team has Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk, who both play in the slot. It makes no sense to me that he's going to be a breakout guy this year. Obviously, the area that he's trying to operate in is populated by the 2 best receivers on the team. Doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not big on Vance McDonald or any Pittsburgh tight end. Big Ben's not a big tight end guy. So, in this range, Charles Clay, Tyler Eifert, George Kittle, I'm not enthused about any of them. But if you want to take a shot in the dark, Tyler Eifert, who knows?
All right, now that we just went tier by tier for tight ends, we're going to get into the stock market for tight ends. Again, original name. Very OG of us. Stockwatch, Panda Watch. So, first section of the stock market for tight ends in our QB Tight End Summit episode. We got biggest offseason rise and fall. So, compared to last year, maybe in the beginning of the season or at the end of last season to the beginning of this season in the off season, what was the biggest riser and what was the biggest faller for you for tight ends?
Definitely the biggest riser is got to be Trey Burton. Starting last year, Zach Ertz's backup tight end. Obviously, he had a great moment throwing a touchdown in the Super Bowl to Nick Foles on the Philly special, but he's not just a gadget guy. He moves to Chicago. He looks great in the preseason. He might be a security blanket for Trubisky, and, he can get deep. He's a good athlete. So I like Trey Burton this year, and I think the rest of the fantasy community does as well. So he's definitely the biggest riser.
Yeah, another contender for that, I think, could be Ed Dickson. Is a very deep sleeper on Seattle. Now that Jimmy Graham is on the Packers, Ed Dickson kind of fills that void. And he had a couple of good games with Carolina last year in a backup role when Greg Olsen went down. So Could be a contender for the biggest offseason riser. What do you got for biggest offseason faller for tight ends?
Yeah, so I kind of hinted about this guy earlier as a guy that's going probably later than he should, or maybe now he's going where he should, as opposed to going too early. Jordan Reed, this guy has, obviously everyone's shying away because of the injuries, and I get that, but he's now like an 11th, 12th round player, and this guy was the top overall tight end a couple years ago. When he's on his per game splits are unreal. He's a really, really good player. Obviously, huge injury risk, but he's got to be the biggest faller this year. He went from like that premier or just under the premier tier to now, a back end starter or a high end backup. So he's got to be the biggest faller.
Yeah, and they still have Vernon Davis there as a pretty serviceable backup. So you got to think like if he's even a little hurt, they're not going to risk him getting hurt for the whole season. They'll just put in Davis in that. They'll sub him in. He's still pretty effective even at like 34 years old. One thing like I'll challenge you on is the quarterback situation. It either stayed the same or got a little better with the switch to Alex Smith and the Redskins. So if Reed is out there, I think he can actually do pretty well with Alex Smith because you look at Travis Kelce last year with Alex Smith, he absolutely killed it. And they have a similar situation if you think about it too. Like pretty good tight end when healthy, deep threats. So like the Redskins have Paul Richardson and a couple of guys that can take it deep, just like Tyreek Hill did. So I think he is one of the biggest fallers, but I think that's just injury risk. I think another contender for that, probably Jimmy Graham. I think he's getting overblown in value and valuations. He's not going to do nearly as well with that as people think with Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball. Rodgers has never thrown it to tight ends. So that brings us into our most overvalued and undervalued. Yep. Pretty nice segue. Who do you got as overvalued?
Well, believe it or not, I have Jimmy Graham. I think obviously he's great in the red zone. Caught I think 10 touchdowns last year, but it's a touchdown. It's going to regress to the mean. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers might prioritize him in the red zone, but Devontae Adams is there. Randall Cobb is a sneaky good red zone receiver. They hopefully will run the ball more effectively than they did last year. So Jimmy Graham's touchdown numbers probably won't be the same, and his yardage was not helping you last year. He's not the high octane yard churning tight end he used to be. He's kind of just a goal line, basically a goal line back at this point, and that fluctuates too much for me. I don't like Jimmy Graham. I think he's getting way overvalued as like a second tier tight end. I think he's closer to like the David Njoku, Trey Burton range than the Delaney Walker range.
Yeah, overvalued. I have Greg Olsen, and this is just based on age and usage. He's been one of the highest utilized tight ends, in the league, and he's getting up there. I think he's 33 now. He was hurt pretty much all of last year, and yeah, he'll be back hopefully healthy, completely healthy, but I just don't see him rising again to like top 5 tight ends. Maybe he'll be like I'm going to say he's like 9 or 10 tight end wise. So I think he's getting a little overvalued. What do you got for undervalued?
Yeah, for undervalued, it's a guy that you obviously just talked about, Kyle Rudolph. All the signs are pointing to a huge year for him. I don't understand why he's getting picked so late. Just listeners, take Kyle Rudolph as your tight end and thank us later. It's that simple.
Big Rudolph guy. Big Jack Doyle guy too. I think he's getting undervalued. I think the move that they did for Eric Ebron is getting blown out of proportion. I don't think he's going to be nearly as good as Jack Doyle will. Andrew Luck back healthy. You're putting Doyle in your lineup. Home run breakout. Who you got for tight end?
I like David Njoku. I know his hands are suspect, but so are Will Fuller's, and Will Fuller is just like immense. He has immense upside when he's on the field. Obviously, David Njoku plays a different position. He's on the Browns. However, this guy's a sick athlete. He can really just go up there and get the ball. He high points the ball like very few. And I think he could emerge as the premier red zone threat for the Browns. Obviously, Josh Gordon coming back is going to take away from that a tiny bit. But David Njoku could be a really, really nice, albeit touchdown-dependent tight end 1 for your team this year.
Yeah, and I got George Kittle on the 49ers. I think the Jimmy G within a full offseason with these guys to kind of gather some or to get some reps down with each other. I think Kittle will do pretty well. We alluded to him before. Who do you got for biggest bust potential for tight ends this year?
For me, it's Evan Engram. He's going, pretty much side by side with Delaney Walker, who I'll get to in a second, who I love. Evan Engram is going to see a much smaller target share this year. He was really the guy for the Giants last year because they lost everybody else. They added Saquon Barkley with the number 2 overall pick, who's going to eat up more receiving work than people realize. You know, Odell's back from injury. You still have Sterling Shepard there. He's the number 4 option for me in the passing offense that is headed by Eli Manning. So, you know, it doesn't get me excited. If he slips, I'll take him. He's a very good player. But where he's getting drafted right now, I definitely think he has some bust potential.
I'm going to disagree on the 4th guy in that offense. I think he's at least the 3rd, if not 2nd. I don't think Sterling Shepard's going to catch like that many more balls than him. And obviously Odell's the number 1 guy there, so I'll rebut on that. I think Saquon, we don't know how many passes he's going to catch. We don't know how well Eli's going to do, so he might need to rely on Engram. But I see what you're saying with the biggest buzz potential. I have Kelsey, who I just talked about before.
Wow.
Again, Patrick Mahomes coming in as quarterback. We don't know. We have no tape on him. We have no idea how many times he throws at the tight ends. He's a big arm guy, but that really bodes well for Sammy Watkins and Tyreek Hill. Running game should be stronger with Spencer Ware back, and might take some goal line ability or plays away for Kelsey even. So I could see Kelsey being the biggest bust in tight end this year in terms of where he's getting drafted. And then who you got for bandwagon tight end? Everyone's guy maybe everyone's talking about, or not a lot of people are talking about, that you want to just ride that bandwagon.
Delaney Walker. I mean, hop aboard, people. I know I picked Marcus Mariota for my bandwagon quarterback. This is no coincidence that his tight end is my tight end bandwagon. This connection is going to be lethal this year, I'm telling you. Play action passing. You know, obviously, if you kind of extrapolate what the Rams did last year to the Titans, the Rams don't have a premier tight end, but Delaney Walker could be that inside receiver that kind of gets that Cooper Kupp type role, and you know he's great in the red zone. This guy is going to be so just solid this year. He's a guy that you plug in your lineup. You don't have to worry about him. He's going to give you a ton of upside, a nice floor every week. Delaney Walker, definitely my bandwagon guy for this year.
Yeah, we talked about him. My bandwagon guy, we talked about him a lot, is Kyle Rudolph. Again, Kirk Cousins is only going to help him. Throws the ball most of the time to the middle of the field or slot wide receiver. So I think Thielen, you got to think like Adam Thielen's going to have a great year. I think Diggs will have a good year, but Thielen will have a better one. I think Rudolph will get close to 800, 900 yards and close to double-digit touchdowns with Kirk.
Wow.
And that wraps it up for tight ends. Any tight end questions, find us in the channels. And that does it for our QB and tight end summit. So we combine these two for our illustrious listeners, our UQTs, if you will. Any questions about QBs or tight ends? If you have a burning question about if you're taking a guy too early, taking a guy too late, sleeper potentials, submit it to us, DM us. We had a lot of fun with this summit, though. Know that.
Yeah, we reached the summit twice. We summited twice here, which is always a good day.
I'm proud of all of our listeners for being active in the channels, and I want to hear you guys. I want to hear your best roast of Citibike. So DM us your best roast of Citibike. Smoke them like a smoked meat.
Slay them.
Smoked brisket.
Low and slow.
Brisket and ribs.
Oh, that sounds good. We got to get back down south, Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a business trip down there soon too. So see you guys down there.